Ukraine claims to have the strategic initiative across all fronts, but are they coming to the realization that their best successes actually lie in the East? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's June 30th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first, let's take a look at the control map. And there's been really three areas of progress. The first has been near Robotyne. You could see, again, Ukrainian forces advancing just a few hundred meters into this area here. Again, a sort of low value open field outside Robotyne. And again, you can see based on the ruler here, we're looking at just a really, really piecemeal sort of success of less than 800 meters. So just grueling fighting happening out here. And so when we move over to the east, you can see this is where we're seeing somewhat more progress. There's also the Seversky Donetsk and Donbas Canal where they've reported some progress. And you can see here that this is actually somewhat more significant because this is an actual piece of terrain they're fighting over with some level of value. This canal, of course, is a valuable water supply for a number of different Russian-controlled settlements, and the ability to get on the far side of it is going to be valuable for Ukrainian troops who would be able to mass and use it to conduct further offensive operations outside of places like Klitschivka. So not a ton of direct progress, but definitely good to see Ukrainians flipping control of, again, a route and feature of actual tactical import. Of course, the last spot where we're seeing some progress is Orakovo-Vasilivka, and you can see, again, fairly minor progress working their way through this wood line here. But I think the important thing is that what we're seeing is increasing levels of steady progress. Now, as I've talked about, Russian forces are reliant. When you have a breakthrough against an enemy like Russia, what you would see is growing momentum. You would see small progress start to compound as units fall back to increasingly hasty positions. And we've seen over the last maybe week, we've seen an increasing amount of progress. This has taken us back. We'll take it back about 9 days. So look at the Bakhmut front over the last 9 days, right? You can see that there's been steady progress over the last maybe 4. This itself, I think, is a good sign for the troops. Right, again, here's the 24th. So the last 5 days, you can see that there's been a decent amount of steady progress, though it's worth noting that what the map hasn't acknowledged is that Russian forces have pretty effectively counterattacked here near Burkiva and reclaimed basically all of this area beyond the reservoir. But again, is it being offset by some of these gains out in Orakovo-Vasilivka? Maybe. Still, I think Ukraine is even at a point where they're starting to acknowledge that this may be their best chance of really making forward progress. Anyway, let's take a look at the combat map, and you can see that Ukrainian forces really pushing very hard in Robotyne. They report that there's actually fighting this deep into the area, but it looks like Russian forces have counterattacked. So they're describing this as partial success. But I think this is a better illustration, honestly, of what the combat looks like in these large open areas, right? It's not like they're fighting ground for ground. They're trying to make these breakthrough advances, pushing hard, and then being counterattacked by Russian forces. So this is actually much closer to what I think of as reality. You could see at their apex, they were halfway to Tokmak, a major Russian airbase, but were pushed back by counterattacking Russian forces. So this is part of the challenge, right? I will say it is unusual to have Ukrainian defense forces even acknowledge that they were this deep into Russian-held territory before being pushed back. Though we've certainly heard stories that is the case. Now, we could also see, of course, they are continuing to do work outside of Rivnopol, near Staromayorsk, and of course, pushing outside of Bakhmut. All of this progress, and you can see here, right, this is sort of the issue with mapping, is that this map has never really claimed that Ukraine controlled deep past the Burkiva Reservoir. So some of these details, again, I'm using the small changes to the map as indicators of progress for Ukraine, not necessarily as gospel truth of who holds which square foot of ground. But as you can see from the map and from the terrain and marks of what's been recently liberated, there's considerable progress in Bakhmut, much more so than we've seen in and around some of these regions. Again, I'm really curious about this area here, because again, if you're able to penetrate this deep into Russian lines, it may be an indicator that a breakthrough could be imminent. But it could simply mean that Ukraine is reporting the areas where their forces are reaching that may not necessarily be indicative of any larger thing, right? And this could be simply the fact that a small special forces team did some level of disruption operations back here. It may not be, a main body force that's conducted this assault. Just some things to bear in mind when we see this sort of reporting. If you're curious about getting the most accurate reporting, you want to check out the strategicsitrep.com. This is a newsletter I launched in response to the fact that so much of the national security news has been taken over by clickbait. They don't distinguish from real stories from hyperbole, right? It feels like every Chinese military exercise is an imminent invasion of Taiwan. It's not, and the smart consumers know that, the analysts at the Pentagon. So I launched the Strategic Sitrep to give you the no-nonsense national security news of the week. We hit you once a week with the key geopolitical national security news stories. And most importantly, we give you the so what. What does it mean that this story is significant? Why do you need to know it? And so if you're interested and you want to get that, it's free. Just go to the strategicsitrep.com, drop in your email, and we'll hit you once a week with the data you need to know. Now let's talk about the Ukraine's general staff. This I thought was really interesting because the Ukrainian general staff has reported that they have seized, quote, the strategic initiative in the Bakhmut direction and are currently conducting a broad offensive in the area. Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar similarly stated that Ukrainian forces seized the, quote, operational initiative in the area and reported that Ukrainian forces advanced 1.2 kilometers in the direction of Klitschivka and 1.5 kilometers in the direction of Kurdyumivka. Ukrainian commander also stated that Ukrainian forces have the strategic initiative in a phone call with the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley. What do they mean by the strategic and operational initiative? Well, initiative in military definitions. Here we go. Initiative in a military context, according to the Australian Army, but NATO doctrines generally have to align and stuff like this so that they can interoperate. Initiative, basically, and this is actually, I think, a good, understandable definition here. Let's take the whole thing up, is whether or not you have the choice to take the offensive and make threats that cannot be ignored, forcing your opponent to respond before they are prepared, right? That's sort of like having the first move in chess every time, right? It means that you move, they have to respond. You move again, they have to respond. And think about it a little like a game of Twister. If you have the initiative and you have good commanders, Russia goes, okay, you're going to attack in this front. I put my left hand on red. Then they go, okay, well, now we're attacking on this front. All right, I put my right hand on blue. Then they go, okay, now I'm attacking in a different way or in a different direction with different forces. They go, okay, I'm going to put my right hand on yellow. And then they go, okay, I'm attacking in another direction. And suddenly they collapse because all they've done is respond. They've never forced the enemy to engage in a threat, so to speak. They've never forced the enemy to change their plans. So It's about Ukraine making plans and Russia responding to them. And remember, initiative occurs at different levels of conflict, just like anything else, right? The tactical is individual decisions in the service of a highly specific mission. Usually, think inside of like a kilometer, right? A forest, a bunker. Operational is things like individual towns, and strategic is the entire conflict. So they claim to have operational and strategic initiative. They've probably had that for some time, since Russia has deliberately pivoted to the defense. But what does it mean? And, well, it's not clear that it means much. And when I hear these sort of small numbers comparatively, I worry when they're touted as being victories. It would almost be better to me if they simply acknowledged that this was shaping, that they were still trying to like figure things out, that progress was tough. But to claim that these are signs of real progress, this is weeks of work, as we've just talked about, and advancing a few hundred meters a day. This is no faster than the Wagner Group advanced in Bakhmut. And I get sort of mad because ISW rolled their eyes when Prigozhin made those claims, but now that it's the Ukrainian armed forces making those same claims that this is a normal offensive work rate in modern war, and maybe they're right. Maybe they're both right, that in modern war, with the inability to clear substantial minefields, maybe this is just how it is, in the era of the prepared fires. Maybe this is what progress looks like in modern war. So again, just something to bear in mind as we check these sources, that there's going to be some level of bias that creeps in, even to the most dispassionate analysis. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me. As always, thank you so much to Combat Vet News' Colonel tier members. I really appreciate all you guys. You're just absolutely keeping the lights on for me. Thanks to our Lieutenant tier members. Again, you guys are enabling me to do what I do, keep me independent. I've got the staff helping me out behind the scenes, and it's not cheap to do this. So having you guys really enables me to do this every day. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you all in the next one.